Sometimes when I'm thinking about us, before we got lost and we parted, back to back we would carry on and we'd do anything for what we started. But this time we could break. I'm running dry, everything's the same. We'll try tonight. This time we're not safe and sound, not safe and sound. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. Sometimes when I'm reasoning about us, I know you got me, it's so effortless. Back to back we would carry on and we'd do anything for what we started. But this time we could break. I'm running dry, everything's the same. We'll try tonight. This time we're not safe and sound, not safe and sound. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the FPV News with JB and ItsBlunty. Welcome back, Blunty. How are you doing today, man?
Good, Joshua. Welcome back to you as well.
Oh, thank you. I was the one who was actually gone, wasn't I?
Yes.
Yes, I hate skipping a week, but sometimes I'm gone on Tuesday, and it just doesn't feel the same. People sometimes say, well, why don't you just have Blunty do the news without you? I don't know. I mean, if you wanted to, I'd probably be like, okay, but it doesn't feel the same without the chemistry. I don't know.
No, I prefer the duo.
There you go. That's right. It's like Hall and Oates or Simon and Garfunkel. Like, did Simon ever go and play without Garfunkel? How did that work?
Yeah, Steely Dan.
Steely played without Dan?
Yes.
Welcome back to you guys as well. Thank you so much for being here. We are going to give you the FPV news over the last week, our commentary on the, well, last 2 weeks now, the major things that happen in FPV. And if there's anything you feel like we miss, make sure that you email news@fpvknowitall.com. Thank you to the people who submitted some of the items that we're going to be talking about this week. And what are the items that we're going to be talking about this week, Blunty?
All right, so let's run them down real quick. This week we're going to talk about, there was a drone show at the Renegade burn. You might have been
Really?
seen that, possibly.
Wow.
Out of the,
What do you think about that?
We'll take a look at that. AT&T is launching drones to provide cell service for areas that are impacted by natural disaster or big events. We'll talk about XJet, who's in the chat, is talking about FPV is dead.
He wasn't. I thought he'd be sleeping because it's just got like 6 a.m. for, and I forgot, he's an old guy. He probably gets up at 6 a.m. He's here. I gotta really, hang on. We gotta change some of the show notes if he's gonna actually be here. Go ahead, keep talking.
ExpressLRS is finally possible for your SBUS only FC. And that's correct. It looks like we finally had a rant that paid off, so we'll take a look at that.
Ranting works, apparently.
Yes. And so did the ExpressLRS devs.
Yeah.
DRL has found a new sponsor in crypto, Algorand. So we'll take a look at what Algorand even is.
Oh, DRL.
Yeah, NFTs and now crypto sponsors.
By the way, correction, XJet says it is 10 a.m. where he is, not 6 a.m. I just assume all areas of Australia and New Zealand are 12 hours ahead of me, but he's like 14 hours ahead. He says practically dinner time.
And then we're going to take a look to quick talk about the interview Chris Rosser did with Carl Zhao of Sharkbite HD0 fame, and then a quick look at his FPV video series on analog DJI and HD0 video. Then we'll take a look at DJI for long distance, as Wesley Vardy takes us to over 13 kilometers on DJI range testing. We'll take a look at controlling drones through just your eyes through direct vision. We'll take a look at where you should mount your capacitor, though I think a lot of us know. We'll have maybe some evidence for that. And then last but not least, I'll have a little rant/talk about where the state of sims are currently, and we'll look at the uncrashed sim, or at least my opinion of it.
And when you said you were going to do a little mini review of the uncrashed sim, I was like, well, how is that a rant? And you were like, wait till you see what I think of it. So, not to spoil it.
I might not share your opinion.
Well, I don't have an opinion. I haven't flown it yet, although I certainly would like to try it. I have a piece of news that I'm going to sneak in here, which is, if I could take you off camera for a second, Blunty. I got some new. Oh, look at those cabinets! Yes, that's what I've been doing all day. And if you were following along on my Discord of my desperate attempts to get it off a trailer with only my own back, it was a lot of fun. But that's the biggest news I've got for today, and I'm sticking by it. So new furniture in the studio. People are going to be very excited about that, I'm sure. I guess our first news item is kind of related to me because I was actually I went to Burning Man last week, which wasn't Burning Man because Burning Man was canceled. But it turns out that the place where Burning Man is held is federal land. It's just, you can go there anytime. Actually, you can't go there normally during Burning Man because the Burning Man organization has a deal with the Bureau of Land Management where they pay them lots and lots and lots of money. And then for like the whole 8-week period around Burning Man, no one can be there but them. Otherwise, you would just show up and they wouldn't be able to charge money for tickets. But since they canceled it, it was fair game, and about 20,000 people were just like, F it, we're going. And I was one of them. It turns out there was some drone-related news there because there was a ban on burns on the Playa. So normally they allow large-scale burns, and then there are things that they do to, recover any damage or to prevent or recover damage to the Playa surface because the Playa is it's ecologically fragile. But this time the Bureau of Land Management said no large-scale fire art, so they couldn't burn the man, which is kind of a big deal. And then something interesting happened, Blunty.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, you've got some pictures of it, haven't you?
Yeah, there's pictures on a couple different videos that I was able to find. There was basically a big drone show instead of a Burning Man. We got a bunch of cool flying drones doing all kinds of different art, some live music and announcers, it sounds like, from checking it out. And there's a bunch of different scenes showing up. They did the big man at some point. Yeah. Pretty cool.
And I've seen drone shows. I've never seen a drone show in person, actually. I've only seen it on the internet, but it was so cool in a way that kind of is hard to communicate if you weren't there. I don't know. It was really cool. I mean, it's not the same as obviously burning a giant effigy with real fire, but it was pretty cool. Do we have the actual man burn?
Yeah, if you go check the videos,
There's a video here. Yeah, there we go. So they actually... No music, please. I can't have any music. I'm just going to mute that. Sorry, guys. Not going to get a copy strike. This is the actual man. So we tried to identify the company that did the drone show, because obviously this is not just some dude with his drones. This is like professional setup.
5 or 6 minutes is where that man comes up.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, there we go. But I was on a Saturday night. I was in my camp, and all of a sudden I hear screaming off in the distance, and I look out at the horizon, and there it is. Like, really cool. Yeah. So this is what they did instead of a man burn. And these are all just drones hovering in the air. So cool. They did several other drone shows as well. Yeah. Hang on, oh, there we go. Now it starts to rotate. And the arms go up, and hang on, it's going to take forever. The arms go up, and then it sort of virtually lights on fire. The fire virtually lights on fire and then crumbles into ashes. It's super cool. I can't imagine like how this is even done. I would love to know more, to be honest with you.
Yeah, from what I've seen, it's all like computer programs, like drones are assigned numbers, and then it's like the program maps and does the whole show. But I don't know anything about like how the control links are done between them, or like physical gyro accelerometer stuff or anything like that.
Like, how is the positioning? The positioning is so precise. Do they have some kind of, like, it clearly isn't like GPS. Do they have some kind of localized positioning system with sensors at the edges of the sort of play area? I don't know. I would love to know more. It was really cool to see in person, though. So
yeah, I bet.
Anyway, that's what it takes to get me to skip a live stream for you guys. If you guys want to see any of the links that we're doing, by the way, the links are down in the video description below. So all the stuff we're talking about. Yeah. All right, Blunty. Well, there we go. A little self-indulgence here at the beginning of the hour. But what do you... Blue Cheese DK says StudioDrift.com is the company behind the show. Is that the website that I sent you, or the Facebook page I sent you, Blunty? Because I had a Facebook page for the company that I thought did it.
You sent me Drone Stories as the Facebook page.
Oh, well, I maybe have been spreading bad information. Okay, that's not working either. All right, fair enough. We don't know who did it. Anyway, let's go ahead, Blunty. Let's go ahead with the next one.
All right. So next up, AT&T has launched a drone, basically platform/system to provide cell service to areas that are impacted by natural disaster or for large events. Essentially, they're calling it the Flying Cow, which is the cell on wings.
The cow, cell on wings. Okay.
Essentially, you just it's a tethered drone with a network cable or a couple network cables, and it's like kind of like a flying router that does LTE coverage.
Now, this is really cool. I've seen tethered drones before, and in case anybody, let's see if we can find a good picture. In case anybody doesn't know, there's like a big backpack-sized, suitcase-sized base station, Pelican case-sized base station down on the ground, and the drone has a cable, a tether cable, that provides power, and basically means you can fly forever. You either power the base station off a generator or off just you plug it in, or it has gigantic batteries. But it can it's like putting up a radio antenna, except without a physical tower, right?
Yeah. And they talk about stuff like, it can maybe even like go back up when like a tower might have been taken down by something, because it can fly against wind resistance and a bunch of different options. So yeah, pretty neat thing. And hopefully those are going to be deployed more often in areas that need it.
Yeah. Yep. Those tethered drones, they're just, it's crazy because we think of drones as having a very limited flight time and going everywhere. And this idea that you might want a drone that just hovers in the air and doesn't go anywhere for a long time is so different from the way we think about them. And then you're like, yeah, well, why not just put a wire on it while you're at it? Steve Mann says, why not just use a big helium balloon on a tether? Good question. There has to be a good reason.
I'm sure it could easily be punctured, and then you have to have repair kits. And I don't know. I'm sure there's pros and cons to both, I would imagine.
License to drive. That's a very good question, too. And I don't know the answer, license to drive. But license to drive says, I mean, obviously the cable has to be relatively thin or it would weigh too much. And so you want a thin, light cable. So how do you then send enough power along the cable for the drone to fly? And license to drive suggests that they might have high voltage on the wire, so the amps are low, but then the drone steps it down. That's plausible, but I don't know. Could they be doing 50 volts, 100 volts on the wire? I don't know.
Yeah,
good question,
not
though.
sure.
Yeah, if anybody does know, let us know. Brad says underwater ROVs can use 400 volts DC along the wire and drop it back down to 24 volts. Yeah. Chad Rains suggests they're running AC on the wire. None of us know whether these answers are right. All of them are plausible, though. Double A reminds us that the wind will push a balloon around, but a drone can stay in place. It's true.
True, yeah.
All right. Well, that's a kind of a cool application. I've heard of some military applications, some public companies selling drones to the military that have similar setup, where if you're a military unit and you're setting up a base, somewhere temporary, you want to have like overwatch so you can see if anybody's approaching you from a distance. But setting up towers, may not be feasible, and they use some stuff like this. So, yeah, it's a pretty cool application.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, I guess we got to get to the topic of XJet and FPV dying. And I say that a little bit dramatically because FPV died a little while back when Pavel Spikowski, the iNav dev, pointed out that FPV was dead. And a few years before that, Pavel also said that FPV was dead. Somewhere in between there, I think Bruce said FPV was dead or dying. And so what happened? Let's start with the background, Blunty. What did XJet do? He's in the chat. He can tell us if he thinks we got it wrong, but we're not going to actually call him up and put him on because that's not how we do the news. What did he say?
So basically, he made a video about a chart, and that it was basically a chart that it turns out was created by a third-party think tank, the Eno Center for Transportation. I just want to say that like Bruce did make a follow-up video about this, explaining that he understands that it is not from the FAA, but I do want to, like, that's kind of why we're talking about this. So yeah, essentially, so this chart, it was scary to a lot of people that read it. Because
I've got the chart up right now.
Yeah, if you read it, it basically splits us into CBO and non-CBO hobbyists. So in a way, essentially, they want to split us so that if you fly under the rules of the CBO in your Flya, then you're fine because you're flying under rules. Mm-hmm. And then if you're flying in a non-CBO, not under the Flya and everything, that they want to have other licenses and rules for your FPV and things in that airspace.
And specifically what this chart seems to say is that if you are a non-CBO hobbyist, basically means you're not flying according to the AMA safety rules, then you cannot do FPV. That's what this, it's a little hard to read here, but that's what this chart says. Which freaked some people out because they watched Bruce's video, and whether this is what Bruce meant to convey or not, but people said the FAA is going to outlaw FPV unless you have a Part 107. But there are several reasons why that isn't accurate.
Yeah, and so so mainly because this is from a third party. So this was information that basically this Eno Center, it came together and decided this set of safety rules that it wants to propose.
Well, who is the Eno Center?
It's just like a third party think tank that is presenting information to the whatever the current version of the ARC committee is. I can't ever remember the name of it, but it's basically the committee that looks at all these drone rules and tries to decide what they want to submit to the FAA to be like, here's what we're going to do, or here's what we should do. And then the FAA is going to decide based on that, and then what it's doing, like how to move its rules along time.
Yeah.
Right. So there is some influence here possibly, but the thing to consider here is that this is a separate company providing a set of things that they completely came up with. And they're proposing this set of things to this group and eventually the FAA.
Well, and so, as we know, the FAA always listens to the ARC's recommendations, he said sarcastically. Yes. because the ARC made recommendations about remote ID, which were completely ignored by the FAA, and they just came up with their own thing.
Yeah, before the final rule, they got together and did this big committee where they had all these like outlines and guidelines, and they ignored 90 to 95% of that and made their own rules, basically. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the reasons I would say, like, this isn't really something we should be super concerned about. However, I do understand the reason to bring it up. However, my opinion on it would just be that, like, maybe we should take the time to look at the webinar, like, because they did a webinar that this original video was about, and that they have like a whole document.
If only someone had watched, if only someone on this very webcast had watched the webinar and knew what else was in it. I didn't.
Yes.
Did you?
I did, yes. Yeah, so essentially...
Oh, no, how convenient.
Yeah, but really my point of view here is just that, like, if you consider what they're saying, I think we should be looking at what they're saying and rebutting what they're saying.
Absolutely.
Because if you take a look at what they're saying a lot of the same things we are, but they're drawing different conclusions than our industry draws. So if you look at what they're saying, they say, hey, we often talk about there's no risk assessment, right? We say all the time, like, why isn't there a risk assessment? That's one of the reasons we're suing the FAA, to say, like, you're doing this without any guidelines or any reasoning because you never did this risk assessment. But what they're saying is, because there was never a risk assessment done, we're more vulnerable to over encroaching law if something happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. I agree with that. There should have been a risk assessment. There's no basis for the laws except that somebody pulled them out of their ass.
And so their point of view is, if we make laws that are less strict than we think will happen if an accident happened, then we can counteract this overreach by the government that will happen. So I think it's important to, like, take a look at their proposal and then look at what they're doing and then kind of decide, like, instead of just brushing them off and saying this is ridiculous, I think we should take a look at it and go, like, hey, where are they coming from? Why are they saying this? And how can we better, like, push this into the right direction? Because I think overall, their, like, concepts are okay. Like, their ideas behind what they're trying to do are, like, kind of the same thing we talk about. But unfortunately, I think the conclusions that they draw here are stuff that a lot of us would not draw, and it's over encroaching for what we would do.
Yeah, I was surprised when I saw this chart, because until now, when I originally saw this chart, it was handed to me by a random person on the internet who said, have you seen this thing from XJet? And they said, here, this chart is from the FAA. And I was like, really? And it makes a distinction between a Part 107 and a recreational hobbyist pilot. And currently, hobbyist pilots must always fly within the safety guidelines of a CBO. So the idea that the FAA had even considered acknowledging a non-CBO hobbyist, I was like, wait, that's a real sea change. Like, we haven't heard anything like that. And I'm not saying that would be good or bad, but I was like, wow, that's interesting. But go ahead.
I was just going to say, so just real quickly, the reason they're doing this split and the reason that they're, like, saying that they want to have the split is just because if you consider anybody under a CBO would be liable under that CBO. So because you're flying under the rules of that CBO, the guidelines that the CBO has presented you, you signed a document under that CBO and the CBO is following under the FAA. Their opinion is that if you're flying inside of that CBO, inside of that Flya, not, with all their rules, then you're at least under the guidelines of some organization.
Okay.
And their point of view is
does that transfer liability to, like, the AMA if you do something dumb?
I'm not sure, actually. To be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure how the, like, legal liability lays there. But I would assume if you're flying under those, ordinances, then they can't come and get you for violating a law if you're following the laws that they set to you, right? Yeah. So what they're saying is, like, if you're not in the CBO and you're flying long range and you're a recreational pilot, how do you know you're safe? And so their point of view is that we can prove to the government you're safe by making you take a license test. And so then when they come back and say, like, hey, you fucked up, you flew too long range, you shouldn't do this, blah, 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 blah. Instead of just saying, like, hey, there's a piece of paper you looked at on the internet and you could have or could have not printed out. You actually had to take a license test to do this. And that gives more liability on the person and less liability on the system to be over encroached on later. Again, like, I don't agree with much of this stuff. Like, some of it I agree with and some of it I don't. But I do think it's important to, like, consider this point of view because I don't think it's the last time we'll see it.
So I think my take on this is that Bruce is 100% right to be paying attention to this stuff and to point out that this could happen in the future, because these people do have the ARC's ear, and maybe the ARC will ignore them, or maybe they'll be like, yeah, that sounds really good. And I'm thankful that someone is bringing this stuff up. At the same time, to say that this is a done deal, which I'm not saying that Bruce said that, but many people. I got say, let's say 10 or 20 emails from people saying, did you see this video Bruce made? Oh my God, now we can't fly. And I know that no matter what you say on the internet, someone will take it the wrong way. But I also know that Bruce can be a little bit dramatic sometimes. I don't know how to say it politely. I mean,
So,
he's seen this stuff happen before, though. So for all we know, he's going to turn out to be right, and we're all screwed.
well,
And he was
well,
the Cassandra that we wouldn't listen to.
so all I kind of made a comment on one of his videos, and basically my opinion of it was like, hey, listen, the sky might end up falling, but like we've got to figure that out, like, and reason out why it's going to fall before you tell everybody it's going to fall, because then nobody's going to fucking believe when it falls. It's the same thing that happens to Chicken Little or The Word Cried Wolf or whatever. Like, you may have a valid point, but you got to wait or got to get the right information out at the right way, I think, to like actually get these people to listen, or they'll just never listen. They'll just never click on that headline. And part of this discussion we're having now is because of that. Like, you know, we want to let more people know and talk about what's actually happening and have that discussion. So also, we've linked to that webinar. It is now available on YouTube now that it's aired. So if you wanted to go watch that webinar, it's like 45 minutes, and it discusses their point of view on safety. Maybe you can have some rebuttals or that sort of thing. You know.
So let's shift gears, though, Blunty. Let's shift gears. Is FPV dead or dying?
Not currently.
Is it going to die?
Hopefully, no.
Raven 187 with a $2 super chat says FPV is technically already illegal in Australia. Hey, you Aussies, do you fly FPV? Is it dead?
So it depends. It depends on what you consider dead. If you consider dead legally hard to do or impossible, then maybe. But if you consider FPV dead as like, are people doing it and is it alive and well? I think it is. Like, I think plenty of people are doing it regardless. You know, like long range has never been legal. Flying without an observer has never been legal. Flying without your ham in most cases isn't legal. But people are doing it all over the place. So more regulation, I don't think necessarily kills it. I think it's about the people and what they can do.
XJet says people are not listening. That's the problem. Look at how little we as a hobby are doing to protect our freedoms. Registration was just the start, as I predicted. That's a tough one because I'm not sure. I mean, we got so many comments on the remote ID NPRM, a historical number of comments compared to how many comments NPRMs usually get. And here's remote ID. So, I mean, people did come out. I think part of it is that we're just such a small hobby that even when we come out in large numbers, it's not enough to get a signal above the noise.
Yeah, I know Bruce has said previously that, like, you know, they've ignored a lot of that stuff or backed off on it so they can add it later so that it looks better for us now. But, you know, all we can do is go by what we've seen. And if you go by their final rule at all and you look at the listed comments on how they responded to them, I do think there was some give a shit there that they had.
Yeah. I mean, XJet says 53,000 people out of how many in the hobby? I mean, how many people are in the FPV hobby? Let's try to figure it out. Whenever I try to think about the size of the FPV hobby, I go back to a number I once heard about the Betaflight user base. The Betaflight devs know about how many people have downloaded and are using Betaflight Configurator and Betaflight. And the number that I've heard thrown around is the low single-digit hundreds of thousands. Now that's Betaflight users, which is not all of FPV, but I would feel extremely confident based on that, saying that there are less than 1 million global FPV like hobbyists, pilots, less than 1 million, probably less than 500,000. At that point, if we got 53,000 comments, I mean, technically that was just the USA, although many people outside the USA weighed in. It's a pretty good freaking number, considering how hard it is to mobilize people about this kind of thing.
Yeah, I would agree.
Anyway. Yeah. I mean, I guess the takeaway is that people who say the sky is falling are right in some sense. The changes from not being regulated at all to being regulated some are unfortunate. The long-term consequence for the hobby, I think, is difficult to predict.
Yeah.
And saying, this is it, this is the end. Because people email me and they say, well, now that these regulations are here, I guess I was thinking about getting into FPV, but now these regulations are here, I think I'm not going to. And I'm like, don't do that. Like, I mean, I guess it's up to you, but yeah, it's not like that. We're all just having a good time doing our thing. We'll see if it changes in the future. I would rather see, I'm not sure that saying this is the end of FPV every 3 months. I'm not saying that Bruce does that, but I'm not sure that saying everything is the end of FPV. I think that's not an effective way to mobilize people that we need. I'm not sure what is an effective way to mobilize people, though.
Well, there's a question of like, are you going to catch extra people because of something different? Like, I don't know. But I know when I watched the video, I would have preferred to see a rebuttal of the Eno Center's research, like what their article was and what their points were. And that's what I would have hoped from that. And that's sort of where I want to go with it. Instead of just like, again, we're not accusing, but I'm just saying, unless it's just randomly ranting about stuff, or saying like, hey, this is a thing, let's go off about the industry. Let's instead like break down the thing. Like I keep
thinking it's the difference. It's the difference between saying the building is on fire, the boat is sinking, and saying get a hose, get a bucket. One is constructive.
This
and
part of
one
the building
is
on fire, and here's how it got on fire, and let's talk about how to put it out. I think yeah. Because like the more you keep talking, the more I keep thinking like that 45-minute thing I saw in the Eno Center asks a lot of the same questions we continue to ask in the rest of this conversation. They've addressed a lot of these things, you know. Somebody in the Discord has talked about having a risk assessment is a great idea, but something they talk about in this Eno Center thing is it's really hard to do a risk assessment when nobody's registered, nobody logs anything, nobody has any requirements. So how do you do a risk assessment, and how do you prove that long range is safe if you can't prove that long range is safe and you can't
do long range legally at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where like, again, like I want to see rebuttals and talk about all these topics because they've clearly spent the time in a room to go over all this stuff and have all their shit in a row.
Yeah.
And it makes me think a lot when I listen to it. So love to hear the other side.
I think maybe one of the things that I'm hearing you say from watching the whole presentation is that Bruce's take of this one slide represents a threat to FPV, we should freak out and get our pitchforks, actually missed a lot of potentially other interesting content if you had dove deeper into the whole thing.
Anybody who doesn't know about drones and watches that presentation will come away with the idea that we need more regulation and it is not safe. And so my point of view is that we need to watch that and critique it and understand what they're saying and why they're wrong, or if they are wrong, because there's going to be a lot of people who watch and take in that information. If they do, again, it's not got that many views, but who knows who will see it, if a committee or other people see it. It's just a lot of information that is hard to rebut immediately, and it sounds very easy to hear because it's a company, it's a think tank meant to do this. So.
Right. All righty, well. I will say thank you to Bruce for bringing it to our attention. I didn't know about this presentation. This presentation did go to the ARC, or whatever they're called these days, and the FAA will have heard it. And we definitely want to know these things are coming down the pike. It's not a given that it will come true, and but we also definitely should be taking action to fight it. And one way you could do that is to donate to the Race Day Quad's legal GoFundMe. Not sure what the other ways are these days. Anyway. All right. Let's move on.
So we ranted a little bit last show 2 weeks ago about some options for ExpressLRS. We talked about how there's inversion on cheap FCs or FCs that don't do proper UART mapping and stuff or don't have enough room. And boy, that was really frustrating. And well, wouldn't you know it, literally 6 days later, we got a new pull request in ExpressLRS, and it was accepted into the main branch already. Basically, there is inversion support for the RX pad. So the TX coming from the receiver to the RX pad. Now, if that RX is inverted, you can select that and it's all good to go. So basically it's inverting that crossfire just on the CRSF, just on that one wire. And it's pretty cool.
We didn't quite get exactly what we asked for. We asked for, can an ExpressLRS receiver output SBUS so that people who have a flight controller, like a tiny whip flight controller with only an SBUS input, can use ExpressLRS. And the ExpressLRS dev said that would be very difficult. We are very heavily tied into crossfire internally. You YouTubers with your silly demands, you don't understand how hard this is for us as developers. And then one of them went, well, actually, we could just output inverted crossfire if we just flip this bit over here. It wouldn't actually be that hard. And then he did it in 6 days. And I feel like that sets a very bad precedent.
I even told him that. I'm like, be careful.
Because what I take from this is if I whine loudly, they will complain and tell me they can't do it, and then they'll do it. I don't think that's a good ExpressLRS devs. You should have made it at least be 3 weeks.
And just a quick aside on this. This is currently only the ESP receivers. So any of the STM receivers, I don't believe, support the inversion in the same way. But any of your ESP receivers should be able to do this with just the new update.
That's what you should be using anyway, right?
Yes, pretty much. Yeah. The EP receivers, for instance, the Flywoo or Happy Model EP receivers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's actually kind of cool, because one of the things the ExpressLRS dev said that I do agree with is that SBUS is shitty and should die. And they were like, we don't want to like encourage people to be using SBUS. And I was like, yes, but these flight controllers have an SBUS pad and it cannot work with any other protocol because it's inverted. And they were like, well, actually, what if we just inverted Crossfire, and then you could do Crossfire on the SBUS pad? And I'm like, oh, that's better, because now we don't have to use shitty SBUS. We're using Crossfire.
And it only inverts the one wire, so you can still use telemetry on the normal TX pad. So you can sort of do inverted RX, your normal TX on the same UART. Good to go.
It's really, and thank you to Bry.
Captain Bry.
Yeah, he was the one who did most of the work. Thank you to him for doing that. So now now that that's done, I just want to move on to the next thing I'm going to complain about and demand, because that's how it is, right? But I don't know what that is. PWM output. ExpressLRS devs, can we have PWM outputs? How hard could it be? Jeez. 6 days later. All right. Moving on.
So there, just real quick, I will mention there is a solution that I believe Bry also worked on for, it's called, I think, servo to PWM, and then you do something with CRSF to servo. There's like a certain tool set thing you can do. If you go to ask on the ExpressLRS Discord, they can help you with that.
Oh, okay. And you know what else I want? Hold on. The other thing I want is, I want like a basic 8-channel mode or even a 6-channel mode with full servo support. Or I just want to go down to 50 hertz with full servo support, so that I have the option. Those are the next two things I want from ExpressLRS is 8 channels, let's say minimum 8 channels with full support, and just drop the packet. Because if I'm flying a plane with servos, I don't need 500 hertz. I don't need 2 millisecond latency. I don't care. So just give me 50 hertz with full resolution channels. That's number one. And number two, we need a receiver with PWM output. So
Bryce says in the Discord, he actually has the outputs working. He just needs hardware.
Yes! Oh, driving the development forward. I am the middleman between the users. See, that's what the devs need. You know that scene in Office Space where he's like, so what do you do here? And he's like, well, I take the requirements from the users to the developers. And he says, why don't the users just talk to the developers? I'm that guy. The developers are over on their Discord server. They're like, hey guys, what do you think we should do? And they're all nerding out over there. And then my inbox is full of people going, yeah, this ExpressLRS thing is all right, but I can't use it with my servos. What's that up with? And I'm like, hold on, let me go to the developers. All right. All right. Thank you, Bry. ExpressLRS is going to be really good pretty soon. It's getting there. It's really getting there.
I think it's already pretty good.
Some would say. All right. Sorry, Blunty. Moving on. Continue.
All right. So DRL has found a new sponsor in cryptocurrency. A company called Algorand has now sponsored DRL for $100 million deal.
$100 million?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a lot of money.
Wait, are they paying them in crypto?
The details were not made public.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
But yeah, so pretty much, essentially, they just got a new sponsor. They got a $100 million injection over however they're going to get it over the next 5 years, and they have a new partner. So Algorand is basically a new blockchain, or another option for blockchain, and people to use the blockchain in a certain way.
It's a new crypto coin, right?
No, I think it's a blockchain for crypto coins. So there is an algo cryptocurrency, but there's a blockchain called Algorand, and Algorand is a public blockchain. But I believe that technology can be used for other things. Like, it's meant for people who want to use a crypto and a blockchain for some shit they're doing with their program. So then, hey, you can use Algorand for that. That's my understanding.
It's a sort of an agnostic blockchain. You can store whatever data you want on the Algorand blockchain, and that data might be data related to cryptocurrency transactions, but it might be NFTs, it might be, you know, red cat black box log information, I don't know, whatever. Is that the idea?
I'm not 100% sure. Basically, they say, here, I'll just read their thing. The public version of the Algorand blockchain is primarily designed to enable other developers to create new kinds of applications fueled by cryptocurrency. It's been currently used in real estate, copyright, microfinance, and more. And it's open source. So
cool.
That's what I got.
Somehow, though, they have $100 million to give to DRL over the 5 years. So that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, they're valued at $200 million. They started in 2015.
I know how my grandfather felt when the VCR was blinking 12. And you just look at it and you go, what even is this? Because, like, I feel like I grasp like, as much as any sort of layperson could, I feel like I grasp the idea behind Bitcoin. But then you're like, here's Algorand. It's worth $200 million. They have a crypto. They're not really a cryptocurrency. What are they? What are they doing? Where does the value come from? I have no idea. And I'm kind of resented.
My understanding is the tech takes a lot of work on the back end to, like, build the way the blockchain works and how it all works together and how all the servers communicate, all that jazz. So
it's open source. Just you start a coin. You start a Bitcoin. You know, like a Dogecoin, or anybody can do it. How is that worth? I just started one. It's the Bardwell coin. It's worth $200 million. Fantastic. Anyway, I shouldn't
sell that as an NFT.
I'm gonna sell me going, you know, some of the noises I make about quadcopter, you know, that's an NFT. Boom, $20,000. Okay. It's a currency about nothing, Jerry. I want a sketch of Seinfeld learning about Bitcoin. Kramer gets into Bitcoin. Anyway, sorry. Continue with the news. I'm just off on my own.
All right. So let's talk about Chris Rosser.
Okay.
He's got a new interview with Carl Zell from HD Zero. And I kind of just wanted to talk about kind of some of the stuff I learned from this video.
Yeah, here he is. Here's the man, in case you wanted to put a face to the name.
So in case you don't know, HD Zero is what SharkBite is internally. So HD Zero is a chipset, and that chipset and base hardware for the chipset was used to make Bitefrost and then SharkBite. So that's what SharkBite is currently. There are 3 other videos we've also linked that talk about how analog video works, how DJI FPV video works, and how HD Zero SharkBite video works. And that might help you with some context when you go into this interview and they have a conversation about how things work. But one of the big takeaways I took from this was, you know, Carl is just an engineer who is trying to solve a puzzle. I don't think in a lot of other cases we get a view into someone like this. But in this case, we did. And Carl is basically just a guy who was like, I hate the wire on the back of my VR headset. How can I fix it? And that led him to create the system we are using now, and to push and create a better and better system. You know, he's like, I can't really do 90 FPS at, you know, 1440 or whatever I need, but I can do this lower amount and I can make it work well and build the ASICs. And so he designed the chips and built everything out and got everything rolling from his previous design work and was able to produce this system that can do what it does. And he is basically doing this as a retirement goal. So he says, like, he wants to retire with this being achieved, and that will be his final project before he ends his career. And so, like, this is more than money for him. You can hear that in the way he speaks. This is about him developing a system that will be a competitor to analog and can hopefully push analog out. You know, he talks about how analog, and we have before, is like a base chipset that you can buy, the Richwave chipset. And now this is he wants to be the replacement for Richwave, like a digital version of Richwave that everybody can buy and use.
Yeah, and I think everybody who is down on SharkBite. If you're a fan of SharkBite, then you already watched this video. You already are excited. I think if you are neutral or negative about SharkBite, you should watch this video. And I'm not saying it's going to change your mind, but it is very exciting. Like, you see this product and you just think, oh, there's, some corporation is making a product. And maybe you associate it with Fat Shark or Rotor Riot, and you have a certain impression of the product based on what you think those companies might be trying to do. And this interview puts a completely different spin on this. And it's just a very intelligent, very skilled engineer with a passion and a desire to leave a legacy in the world. And it's damn inspiring. And it made me, I'm already a fan of SharkBite, not as big of a fan as some people for various reasons that aren't important. But I got to say, I was like 40% more of a fan of SharkBite after watching this interview. I was like, it has a face. It has a personality. And I'm like, I want this guy to win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of technical talk in here too. If you're interested in the technical stuff, he does go over a lot of that. And they talk about how, everything's modulated and the special things he's done. But if you just consider like one of the things he did. So like basically, digital typically uses OFDM modulation, and it's COFDM, so it's coded OFDM in a certain way. So it's got all this error correction, and it's got these coding headers and all these things that happen on OFDM to make sure that, like, hey, this bunch of data can make it and get error corrected, and you get most of what you need.
Okay.
However, Carl was like, well, that's error correcting all the data, but we don't care about all the data the same. Video has some parts of the video that are okay, some parts of the video that are better or worse, right? And instead of saying sections of the video, because he doesn't have the buffer to do that, he actually says, oh, there's multiple layers to this, right? There's color data, there's luminance, and there's timing of the video frames. Mm-hmm. So what he actually does, and timing of where the lines land. So what he actually does is code those with different values of error correction. So the color data will actually disappear first, and that way it's easier to fit into the space that it goes over the air because you don't have the extra bloat from the error correction. So you might lose some of that color data, but you'll keep the luminance data so you get the brightness of that pixel, and you'll still have a relatively good idea of what it should look like to the eye.
This is something that we know about from video compression and photo compression. The human eye is very, very sensitive to changes in luminance or brightness, but it is pretty insensitive to changes in chroma or color. Like, it's very hard for most people to tell the difference between like a slightly different shade of red. But if something is a difference in brightness, it really stands out. So it's a really clever thing to have error correction on the luminance, but not the chroma. And like that's pretty slick.
And that's just like a custom thing. He's like, well, I'll just do this. And he made it. So
and hearing his attitude towards the development of the project, that he, like, you look at DJI, and DJI is very much a closed house. Yes, they've kind of brought Caddx and RunCam into the fold in a certain way, but DJI has almost never, if ever, just said, here are the chips that we put into our products, go make products. And in the same way that there's this Richwave chip that's in all of our analog VTXs, Richwave has it, it's patented, it's closed in the sense that it's not like completely open for anyone to use, it's licensed, but everybody uses it. And he's saying, I want to do that for digital FPV, for digital HD. I want to be the next Richwave, and have just AKK, Immersion RC, everybody at Rush. I want everybody to be making these VTXs with my chipset in it. That's exciting.
Yeah, and one more thing, like, sometimes you watch an interview or you watch a thing, and it like fills in all the little holes you had in something, and it just like everything makes sense, right? That's how I felt watching this. Like, we've talked a lot about issues with hardware. We talked a lot about issues with design. They had issues with heat, and they couldn't release the products, right? Mm-hmm. And it turns out Carl has little to no experience with product design. He doesn't do that.
He's just this ASIC engineer.
He does ASIC, he does IC. And the reason that the quality of the hardware has been is because that's what he can make. He literally said nobody would buy it and nobody would do it. So he had to make hardware to produce, to prove to people that it worked.
So what you're saying is he really needs somebody like a Tony Cake from Immersion RC to come along and say, listen, buddy, here's how you design a VTX.
Yeah, he needs these guys to come in and take his chipset and build a proper VTX that understands these things like heat dissipation and channels and whatever it needs, right? And then he's also working on a new version of the ASICs as well. Like he did talk about that as well. So like this is constantly in development. And yeah, I don't know. I think if you, like you said, if you weren't excited or you were down on the system, this is a great interview. And if you were hyped on the system, I'm sure you're even more now.
Yeah.
Because this is great to see.
Yeah, it's interesting because people came to me and said, you need to do a rant. As long as you're ranting and people are paying attention, can you please do a rant asking somebody like Immersion RC or Rush or, well, TBS, sure. I'm not sure that TBS is the one who's going to do it, but somebody who knows how to make a VTX, will you please beg them to make, because if he's saying we'll give the ASICs to anybody, they'll give them to them. And I said, well, I feel like until they have a reference design and they prove that it can be done, who better to do it than them? And if they can't do it, why would somebody else take the chance? But what I'm hearing is that they can't do it because they are actually not VTX designers at heart. He's an ASIC designer. He's got this one thing he's doing. And it might actually be beneficial to have somebody like that jump on.
Multiple times in the interview, like, I am not a hardware designer. You know, I just want to make ICs, and that's really what he wants to do, is make the ICs. So, well, and
Fat Shark isn't a hardware designer either. No disrespect intended. Fat Shark makes great goggles. They are great at quality control and manufacturing. I want to give them credit where credit's due, but at the end of the day, what they did was more like industrial design. They designed the goggle shell. They put the optics module in it, but they didn't actually design. In fact, who did that design? It was Tony Cake in Immersion RC. Oh, okay.
Interesting. All right. Hopefully, I know Tony's working with Orca, or at least we've heard that. So hopefully that's not a conflict. I'm working with this HD0.
Yeah, good point. Well.
All right.
Okay, Trappy, get on it. In fact, hey, listen, here's the hot take. Hey, Trappy. I heard Tony Cake's working with Orca on this new digital system. That's going to be hot. If only there was someone out there with a competing established digital system who just needs somebody who knows how to design a video transmitter, and you could just totally beat them to the punch.
Sure, Carl would take your call.
I'm sure Carl would take your call, Trappy. And then, boy, Tony Cake would sure have egg on his face if you got the unified digital HD0 out before Orca.
I will say, like, if somebody could figure out how to do this,
such an asshole,
they will sell a shit ton of VTX.
if it's good.
Yes, I mean, if you can build a better VTX than they did, I think you're pretty much guaranteed to sell a bunch of them, because they just sold a ton of head units at $99. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they lost money on those. That was a promotion sale. I'm sure they lost money. What they need is, I mean, you and I saw a video, Blunty, recently. You sent me a link to a video, and you said, how is this video, SharkBite video, so clean? There's no breakup at all. I've never seen this before. And I think you were wondering if it was like onboard DVR.
Yeah, I literally dug through it, and I found one frame where I could find like 4 white pixels where they were white and black instead of a different color. And it made me wonder, is either like, is this the 1 watt VTX? I know that.
That's what I said. I was like, could this be the 1 watt VTX? If it is the 1 watt VTX, holy crap, it was good. There was no breakup.
I was thinking maybe new firmware with better, better breakup or better handling for like darkening pixels instead of staticking them. It's definitely interesting though, because there's a teaser from Foxeer that was going around for a new camera, and that sure does look like a SharkBite camera from what they're talking about. But then you see the DVR and you're like, there's no way. After seeing the DVR I saw today, maybe there's a chance.
I know for a fact that, so they've publicly acknowledged that the 1 watt SharkBite VTX is in the works. It's a 30 millimeter board, single board, 1 watt. And I know for a fact that some of their testers have it and are flying it. So it's plausible that if you see SharkBite video and you're like, holy crap, there's no breakup, it's plausible that it's a 1 watt VTX.
And in the video we watched, it was all line of sight except for like one dip behind a tree. He was kind of dancing up in the air. Still, though, I was quite impressed to not see any static. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, I'll ring people up and see if anybody wants to help Carl out. That's a new spin on it. I was like, sure, these guys know how to make a VTX. How hard is that? But he's like, no, actually, I don't. I need help. So I'll see what I can do about that.
All right.
Well, from SharkBite to DJI. We can't talk about
Yes.
shark bite without talking about DJI. See, DJI, I'm a good little boy. Wesley Vardy did some DJI range testing.
Yes,
Let's
he
take a
did.
look.
So
Where do
we've talked about before some range testing and some different things that we've seen, but I think this is pretty much the most comprehensive one I've seen in a while, at least for features and such, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. He did some testing. He tested a whole bunch of things. Stock Omni antennas on 25 milliwatts and 50 megabit per second. And now I will say in his tests, the point where he said, this is actually, I luckily clicked right to it. This is the point where he said, okay, this is basically not flyable, and he called it. And he called it at 0.7 kilometers or whatever. I have to say, that's like, I would have turned around. Like, if you're doing proximity, that's not, I would have turned around sooner. So, obviously, you're not going to get as far if you're doing proximity, but it still was interesting to see just how freaking far he got on 25 milliwatts. Let's skip ahead. 2.2 kilometers flyable range, 4.2 kilometers before actual link loss.
Yeah, if you want to flip right to the end there is a final wrap-up, just so we can see those full test results.
Perfect. Yeah, I won't spoil his video. He's got DVR for all of these tests, and I highly recommend you watch his video, both, number one, just because he deserves the views. There's a ton of work went into this video. And number two, because you can actually see the DVR and watch it break up, and you can be like, oh, that's where I would have turned around. It is interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, most surprising things to me here are definitely that 50 megabit is somehow less range than 25.
Yeah.
Does not make any sense to me at all from what we understand about the system, but it's possible they're doing some weirdness with the way they're like doing coding, like between like how they're modulating the signal for some reason.
Yeah.
You would
Who knows?
you would expect if you double the bandwidth and you double the bit rate, then it could still maintain the 1 megabit would be the same.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I would think that 50 megabit is doubling the potential over 25, but that it could just fail down to essentially the same as 25, and it doesn't seem like it works that way.
Yes.
So for long range, you'll get more link at 25 megabits per second, all else being equal. The other big thing he figured out was that having the patch antenna on the bottom, which is a combination of TX and RX, is better than having two patch antenna on RX, which was interesting. And he hit 13 kilometers max range, like a whole bunch of places. So DJI is more than capable of hitting that max range if you crank the output power up to 1200 milliwatts. So
yeah.
One other thing I thought about this is that if you are doing long range like Wesley, or well, some would say 13 kilometers isn't really long range. It's more like medium range, so fine. But if you're staying under about, say, 8 to 13 kilometers, then DJI totally can get it done, especially with some high gain antennas. So people doing mountain surfing and stuff who might be skeptical, well doable. But for proximity with obstacles, DJI still has pretty good penetration compared to analog, but you're not going to get like 10 kilometers. You're going to get like 1 or 2 kilometers, and we have to put a perspective on that.
Yeah.
Okay. I am a Destructo Man says with 50 megabit per second, the wattage is spread over a higher number of carrier channels, so each channel has less power per channel. That's interesting. So you have twice as much bandwidth, but the same number of milliwatts. So each. But
you would expect it, like you talked about, you would expect it to fail down.
Yeah.
Like there would be like some kind of like, hey, when we get to this link quality, fail to 25.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess I'm assuming the guys, the boffins over at DJI did it as good as you could do it and had good reasons because they're pretty smart people. So.
True.
All right. Well, there's a link to that down in the video description if anybody wants to see more of that. What's next, Blunty?
All right. So we're going to look at a quick study that was done by some researchers in China. Essentially, they were able to fly drones through vision in the goggles. So they had people wear VR headsets and then track their eyes in the goggles and then made the drone fly based on their viewpoint. And you can see in the bottom left there, their viewpoint flying through the gates.
Love eye tracking. Eye tracking's so cool.
Yeah.
So
And
this is
something they talk about is like if your eyes can identify and find the space, and then your sticks have to respond, whatever delay that is, you're going to avoid by controlling with your eyes. So if they can find a really good way to do this control that's actually precise, then it might be worth it to do a lot of drone control through eyes, so you have that better latency and more intuitiveness. So like, you wouldn't have to train somebody to do this. They could just like get in the goggles and look at the gate and they would fly there.
Yeah. Fascinating. This looks like it's working similar to the DJI motion controller, where you are changing an aim point that the drone flies towards.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole paper linked here too, if anybody wants to dig into this, and how they did the gaze perception and mapping and stuff. But pretty neat stuff.
It is interesting because as this seems to be showing, like if I'm right here, where's my mouse? If I'm right here and I want to go around this corner, like it might not necessarily be best to just kind of aim right where I'm looking. It might be better to sort of swing wide, so there is some interesting decision making about how to accomplish that. And when you look at the race gates, like for example, if I'm looking at the center of a race gate, I don't necessarily want to fly straight through the race gate from my current position. So that's something that race pilots do, is they'll go through the gate sideways, they'll go through the gate front on, depending on their race line. And I'm not sure how this could really take that into account.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's super interesting, though, that's for sure. It depends on how fast your gaze switches and stuff. We looked at another study I know that was about just like tracking gaze while they were flying. So maybe the combination of these studies will eventually get us to something that kind of covers all the bases.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would still... I think it would be really cool if there was some help, some assistance, but I'm still, maybe I'm, 75% on the sticks, 25%. Yeah, I know where you're going to be going. So I can still sort of control the racing line, but maybe the minute I start looking, it starts orienting on that direction, but I don't know. Yeah. Or maybe it'll just be so smart we won't need it anymore. For slow camera drones, I think it's a lot more, makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, well, if you didn't have to have the motion controller, you could literally just track somebody's eyes and do the same thing, or at least similar things. That's pretty neat.
A lot of people like that motion controller, which surprised me.
Yeah.
A lot of people like it. Losers who fly DJI FPV, but they do exist. I'm being sarcastic, losers. Please don't.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
I'm being sarcastic. Please don't fill up the comments with complaints. Okay. What is the best way to mount your capacitor, Blunty? What's the best place to put it?
Right on the ESC. Traditionally, we've always heard that. Right on the ESC. Get as close to the source as possible.
And that's true. We don't need to debate that. But a lot of people ask, well, what if I put it on the XT60, or what if I get some wires and I hang it off some wires? And we know that reduces the performance of the capacitor, but how much, and does it matter? That's the topic for this segment.
Yeah. So this is somebody ran a scope and did some check-in just to see what it looks like on a scope, because I've never seen it compared like this quickly and easily and conveniently. And you can very clearly see the change as you switch your solutions. So this is on a 5-centimeter XT30 lead on no cap at all, and then 5-centimeter XT30, 3-centimeter wire extension that's not on the XT30, and then directly on the ESC pads. And you can see this improvement as we go.
I will say a 5-centimeter XT30 that's about as short as they ever are. So obviously it would be worse if it was longer. Yes. And we can see, let's see, what do we see here? Like, it looks to me like on the XT30 lead, it's a small improvement, but not much, right?
Yes.
And on a short 24 AWG extension, it's a big improvement. Like there's still noise there, but there's a lot less of those big spikes. It's really smoothed off. And then directly on the ESC pads, it's way, way better.
Yep. And this will completely depend, like how much this affects you. Obviously, completely depends on your build, how much noise you have in the first place, that sort of thing. I think like how clean the design is, how much back EMF you have. There's a lot of factors that go into builds, but especially on a smaller build that might use an XT30, right? Like a toothpick build, we saw a while back, Kebab did a video where he went through and showed the difference. Like you could see the motors freaking out versus not freaking out, and it was clearly from the gyro just being less noisy at the same filtering setting. So
yeah. So to me, this sort of, I mean, we don't have anything quantitative about this though, do we? Like I always say that if you put the difference between having the capacitor on the ESC pads and on the XT60 is like half or worse. That's just a round number I throw out. I wish there was something more quantitative about this, to say, you know, how much are you losing by moving it off the ESC?
Yeah.
People are asking, is there a wire gauge you should use? What's the length you should use? There is, the takeaway is that the further the capacitor is from the ESC, the worse. So if you're going to have a long wire, but it's a high gauge wire, that's better. A short wire is even better. And there's a relationship between the wire length and the wire gauge, but I'm not sure how you would quantify that. So...
yeah, I think this is one of the reasons he lists the short extension instead of on the lead, because a lot of people's solution for this is just leave the lead like it is, and then if you can't quite get it on the ESC pads, you can cut those cap wires and then just solder right to the cap, right to the end, and then just get it as close as possible. So you have a few centimeters of wire instead of it's out on the XT30. So
yeah. I also, Dave, other people are saying I use motor wire. That's also what I do. At the end of a build, I usually have a few centimeters of motor wire laying around. Motor wire is typically 18 or 20 gauge. I'll make that as short as I can, and I'll solder up the ESC with that, or the capacitor with that. The other thing to keep in mind with capacitance, in my opinion, it's a question of enough. And after you have enough, more doesn't help you much. So... you know, you need enough that you're going to have clean gyro, cool motors, and you'll be able to do the tune that you want. More like would make a difference on the oscilloscope, but in terms of your flight experience, I'm not sure it's going to make as much of a difference. So,
yeah. So one thing I'll say is this is some of the best quantitative, like all it is like scope views, but it's like the best that I've seen somebody produce. So if somebody has better results than this, we would love to see them.
Absolutely. And if somebody has a way of quantifying it,
yes.
You know, and I don't know what metric you would use, whether it's peak voltage or whether it's average RMS energy, or I really don't. Someone smarter than me should, because I would love to be able to say, you know, on a 5 centimeter 14 gauge XT30 or 14 gauge XT30 lead, it's 50% the performance of the ESC pads, because people like numbers and I like numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much to Ronnie Mack for doing this work. That's great work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, we got one more topic tonight. Blunty, you flew the uncrashed FPV drone simulator. Here it is on the Steam page. It's not in my Steam library because I haven't bought it. It looks really good, man. Look at us flying around, zippity zip.
Yeah,
it's graphics, dude.
It's pretty much the best looking FPV sim I think you can get by like
behind
quite
car?
a bit. A lot of this is like asset store stuff, but hey, you know, it's hard to complain. It is a cool thing to fly. However, my big complaint is the physics. I think the physics feel like they didn't do much there. Like if you try to race, they have racing courses. If you try to race, it's rough. And a lot of people are like, oh, move the sliders and fix it this way and fix it that way. Somebody told me to move one slider all the way up, and then in another Discord, somebody told me to move the same slider all the way down. And both of them told me that's how a real quad feels. So my problem with this, and my problem with most of these sims that don't like worry too much about physics, is that if they give you a bunch of sliders, you have to decide your own physics. Then we already know how bad people are at like their own confirmation bias. So if you think you're going to set it perfectly like your quad flies, I really don't think you're correct.
Well,
so
we've seen the work that Velocidrone, DRL, and Liftoff have put modeling real quads in the real world in various ways. They've put tons of work into it. If you're trying to make your quad fly accurate to real life, you could move some sliders and say, it feels right to me. But the chances of you actually, and that's fine, it's your
yes.
Do what you want. But to actually get it to fly accurately is an enormous amount of work. And we know that from the people who've done the work.
Yes. So my opinion is that I'm not a fan of the sim just because I want a good simulation of the quad. My goal was not to like be in a pretty video game over flying a good quality quad. However, what I have learned from discussing with people is that many people do not share this opinion. A lot of people, I would say 80 to 90% of the people I've spoken to, do not care about the physics in so much as they care much more about flying in a beautiful sim and nice graphics.
Let's just look at the customer reviews. 135 reviews, very positive. Played it for 15 minutes, easy to set up with the Tango 2, nice graphics, default gravity is decent. Not recommended. He's complaining about the environments because that's not related to the physics though. Huge potential, graphics look nice. Feels almost identical to reality. I don't know, Blunty. It's got a lot of positive reviews. I think that's what you're saying though.
Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. I don't think it matters too much for people how accurate the sim is if there's sliders that they can move to make them feel better when they fly, and there's a pretty place to fly in. And again, that's not a problem. If you like that, then you like that. So you might not take my recommendation and you might actually get the sim. If you want a place to freestyle and you don't care so much about physics, if you want some sliders, maybe you can move around to fix it if you feel like you need to, and you want to fly in really nice environments, then I would say this sim is definitely for you. But if you care about like quad simulation and racing, I would say this is not a sim to pick up, at least for me.
Vivo in the Discord says if you want a realistic looking map with sliders for physics, get the GTA 5 mod. People seem to like that GTA 5 mod a lot. I saw a live stream where TAC was flying it. All right. Well, Blunty, I don't think we're surprised to learn that some people prefer something that looks good but maybe doesn't feel accurate. Yeah. But hopefully it'll get better. I mean, lots of these simulators had crap physics when they first came out and got better. So,
yeah.
I'll give a tip. I'll give a tip to anybody who out there who's flying any simulator and it feels like crap. If you're not getting at least 60 frames per second and preferably more, your physics are going to feel like crap. I don't know why the physics calculations depend on your graphical frame rate, but I've asked all three of the major devs, DRL, Liftoff, I've asked them three, not that they're the only three. Please don't email me. But I've asked them and they all say, nope, the physics are tied to the graphical frame rate. So if you have your graphics on beautiful and you're only getting 30 or 40 frames per second, that's why your physics feel like crap. You want to be ideally above 100 frames per second if you can get it.
Also, Velocidrone has a physics setting in a menu. So if you go in there's a setting for physics high, and I've seen multiple people have that on the lowest setting. So make sure you go fix your physics setting.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty, guys. Let's get a couple of these super chats out of the way before we wrap up. Thank you, Duck My Squee, for $5 New Zealand, who suggests running a Fourier transform on the noise to find the crossover frequency, and that is proportional to the cap to ESC resistance. Sounds good. Maybe someone will do that, but not me. Thank you to Flap Around FPV for a $5 super chat. I got a 5 on an open source physics module. I got 5. Oh, $5. He's betting on an open source physics module. Oh, he thinks that they're using an open source physics library, and that's why their physics feel like crap. Yes. I mean, it's clearly just like some Unity engine that they slapped it together. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, I think it's Unreal. All the asset store stuff is Unreal, but yes.
Okay, so they're just using the built-in physics would be our guess, and they probably haven't tweaked the physics very much.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but the physics that are there are not good. That's what I'll say.
Okay, great.
I don't want to make claims about how much work somebody did.
I feel that that's what you're saying. I'm going to attribute that to you in the future.
Okay.
That they're using stock Unreal physics, and that's why it feels like crap, because they didn't tweak it. No, we know this. I'm not sure. I can't remember where this is from, but people who have developed quadcopter flight simulators in like Unreal or in Unity, they say that you can't just use the default physics because quads do weird things in the air, and you have to develop your own physics engine. Maybe that's what they're doing. Mitoda, thank you for a $10 super chat. Lost drone flying, hit radio station, 1,000-foot tower antenna, and crashed. I see it, but they have a fence with cameras. Is it worth asking for it back or let go? Is it legal? I don't know where you live, and I don't know what the laws are where you live, and I don't know. You have to make that call. I mean, most of the time, the stories that I hear from people who end up in this situation, they go ask politely, and someone says, no problem, and they give it back to them, and no harm is done. If they're going to be an asshole about it, or if you damage something when you crash into it, then you might get yourself in trouble. But I can't advise you on that. You have to make a call there. Robert Gutowski, thank you for a $5 super chat. What does the Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3 mean in the Diatone Mamba F7 stacks? I mean, I guess they revise them over time. Is that right, Blunty?
Yeah, that's just revisions. So you don't buy the same Mamba F405 and think the pads are weird spaces.
Yeah.
So that way you can look up the wiring.
Yeah. I Am Destructo Man says, if you're in the USA, call the station and ask for the engineer. The guy working, the engineer probably doesn't give a crap. Again, unless you broke something. If you broke something, they're gonna be mad at you. And Ho Operator, thank you for a $5 super chat. He makes a recommendation for someone I should check out. I don't know who that is, so I'm not going to read their name on stream. But for the chance that there's somebody who would cause some kind of drama if I read their name on stream. Check out Bob Smith. Well, it turns out Bob Smith is a Nazi. Way to go, Joshua. No, I don't know who this guy is. All righty, that's going to wrap us up. We're 15 minutes over, but I see we had 2 weeks worth of news. Thank you so much for being back with me, Blunty.
Absolutely. Thank you for being back as well. I'm sure everybody's happy to have all your live streams.
Thank you. Me too. Thank you.
Let's not forget, if you got news, email news@fpvknowitall.com right at the bottom of the screen. Always there. If you forget it, you can pull up any stream at any time for the news and you'll see it. Yeah. And then also, if you haven't done it, go like this video. We only got 144 likes on this, so a lot more people here watching. Nice. Go and hit the subscribe button if you didn't do that. Hit that bell thing and then do a comment down there. All those things are helpful, so we appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. And if anybody posts the timestamps in a comment, I will pin the comment and maybe even copy the timestamps into the description. So thank you to anybody who does that. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. See you guys there.
Absolutely.
Happy flying.
See you guys.